Today's episode of the GoldCast is sponsored by Chapstick. Are your lips chapped? Then put some chapstick on them. Welcome to the new GoldCast 2017. We're really excited as, we are not... Traditionally, we do go through the NFL playoffs or some or all the playoffs, depending on how upset we were on the 49ers season. But we are going all the way through, and so expect to see little changes along the way. We've changed our Twitter handle. We do have a website that's coming up pretty soon. We have new intro. So slowly but surely, things are changing. And so here is my brother Ray and I to talk about the final recap for the 49ers season. Here we go.
San Francisco, are you ready?
This is the GoldCast.
Boom! We're back. 2017. The new GoldCast is here. We still have some changes. You'll see some logos, some different stuff. But the GoldCast is here. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the First, baby.
Boom. Ray, we're back 2017, and what a difference a week makes. The 49ers season is over. It's we're putting to bed another rough season, but let's do a quick little kind of season in review. We have the final game against 49ers against the Seahawks, which I actually thought was the most competitive we'd played the Seahawks in a couple years. I thought that was actually one of the best games we'd played against them.
Yeah, we've lost I think 6 straight to them, so something like that, 6 or 7 straight. I know Kaepernick hasn't had the best of luck against these guys. I think he won the very first time they met, and he's lost every other game since. It's been the inverse, much like Aaron Rodgers struggled against us. The Seattle Seahawks have been the Achilles heel to Colin Kaepernick, even when the team was great. But they were very competitive today. I'd love to see that. It was great. Cap overall, I feel like, had a pretty strong season considering all the odds around him. It was much different in 2014 and 15 when everything was kind of crumbling around him and he was kind of a deer in the headlights, lost in the middle of that whole transition. I feel like psychologically he really cleared his head this year and was able to alleviate a lot of pressure off of himself to perform great because he realized that, I think, as he said a couple of times, especially in the off seasons, that he can only control the things that he can control. You can only be, there's part of Kaepernick's game where he is a victim of his circumstances. That is very true. There's 11 guys on the field. There's no denying that. At the same time, the things he can't control, he did very well. I mean, he ended the season with over 2,000 passing yards. 222.41 was the total. He only threw 4 picks. He had 16 touchdowns, and that's off of missing more than a quarter of the season to begin with. Those numbers would more or less look like a Alex Smith in 2011 kind of season. Had he played all year, and that's with a 2-14 team. So I think that's a little telling on Kaepernick's ability to play well despite really bad circumstances, even within the scheme, because the offense did struggle mightily. Some of it was his fault, some of it was young offensive line, a few injuries on the offensive line, and of course maybe not just having the right scheme going into each opponent, because the first half of each game, almost every game, the first half was great and competitive, and in a lot of cases we had the lead. And then in the second half, for whatever reason, things just never were able to continue. We didn't have that continuity going into the second half of games. But I think Cap had a really strong year. I think that's, whether he decides to stay or not, still remains to be seen. I think with Baalke gone, which we'll get into, there's more incentive for Kaepernick to stay, because I think that was the guy that kind of rubbed everybody the wrong way. Jim Harbaugh was kind of a mixture of the two, where he rubbed people the wrong way, but also he didn't get along with Baalke for the reasons that nobody else got along with Baalke. He's just not a very social, conversational guy. He's more of a football guy.
Yeah, I thought Cap did play well. Given the circumstances, I did not realize he'd only thrown 4 interceptions for the season. That's really good.
Yeah, his rating, the ESPN rating, or his, I'm not sure, I don't think this is the ESPN rating, but he had a 90.70 rating.
Well, I still think, Ray, I have to admit, though, I think regardless, I think that was probably the final game we see it with him as a 49er.
There's a strong chance he lets get, because if the new coach comes in and says, I mean, it's up to him. The option, it's his team option right now. Next year it'll be the Niners. I forget how it works. I think either team can let him go. It really depends on the coach that comes in, whether they want to work with him or not. I mean, starting from scratch is a really tough place to be. But at the same time, we know what we're getting with Kaepernick. We know we're not going to have a 70% completion percentage. It's going to be more or less in the kind of mid to low mid 50s, low 60 percentage range.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes he was a little bit better. I know against the Rams he was over 75%. Against Seattle this past week he was 77%. So he did play better. I mean, down the stretch he played really good. Against Atlanta he was 60%, LA 75%, Seattle 77%. That's a really good progression against some really good teams, with the exception of LA. LA is just nothing.
Hey, so we're still better than the Rams, right?
Yeah, and he got sacked more as the last 3 weeks of the season progressed. He was sacked twice against Atlanta, he sacked 4 times against LA, sacked 5 times against Seattle. So despite that, he still was able to pass more efficiently in each successive game. So just some numbers to throw out to people. I know a lot of people, especially on some of the Facebook groups, like to throw a lot of flack at Cap, and when you're looking at it from just a pure fan basis, you're not looking at it from an analytical standpoint, sure, it's easy to see the flaws and just focus on the flaws. But I like to look at the upside, and I like to get into the finite details of his play. And I also am a logical person in that I understand that there's 10 other people involved on the field to help Cap be successful. Anyways, but yeah.
I know it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to use logic all the time. It just makes so much sense.
Yeah, in fact, Cap's numbers this season are the best he's put up since 2013. He missed 2013. He ended with a 91.6 rating. This year he was 90.7. Last year he was 78.5, his lowest since he was a rookie, and actually his rookie season was even better than that. And in 2014 he had an 86.4 rating. Really struggled. He was 6-5 TD interception ratio. He got benched halfway through. He was 19 for 10. That's touchdown interception ratio in 2014. So he made a lot of improvements. I think a lot of it had to do with Chip Kelly's scheme. Another part of it had to do with him clearing his head.
Yeah. So then, I think that's a really good segue. Let's kind of get into that part. Chip Kelly. So I feel like, I don't know if you feel this way. I'm asking you for the first time. I was actually disappointed that Chip Kelly was fired. I actually thought Chip Kelly deserved another year. I thought York was a little aggressive on that front. I thought that while the team was obviously clearly terrible, I thought that the team had shown some definitely significant growth on offense, despite the fact that offense is going to give you about 30 minutes worth of football. I don't think this team under any coach was built for more than 30 minutes worth of football, any game. So I thought Chip's firing was a shock. I thought Baalke's firing came as no surprise.
No, in fact, all the rumors that have come out ever since the Jed York Baalke era, every rumor that has come out towards the end of the season or even prematurely has come true. So this was no surprise. Even the Chip Kelly part caught me off guard a little. I was a little taken aback when I saw it, but wasn't surprised when it happened, because I was like, okay, if this is coming out, then unfortunately this means that Kelly's gone too. So I was also bitter about that too. I didn't think it was very fair on him. I did think the offense made a lot better strides as a group compared to the previous season under Jim Tomsula, even though they won more games. As odd as that sounds, I just felt like it was a little bit more balanced, and Cap was able to play a lot more efficiently under that scheme versus Jim Tomsula's scheme.
Yeah, Cap definitely played a lot better under Chip's scheme, no question. So here we go. So they fire Baalke. How do you feel about the firing of Baalke? I mean, that I think that needed to happen.
Totally needed to happen. This is a guy that does not communicate well. I mean, when you hear the stuff that comes out, and all of it comes out after the fact, it's so annoying.
course.
So Trent Baalke did not communicate very well with the coaching staff, especially during the draft. And I thought that's a really pivotal moment in the offseason where you, especially when you have a new coach and a new staff coming in, you want to get your scouts together. Because, I mean, in the offseason, it's not like the coaches are like, yeah, they're drawing up playbooks, but they also have to evaluate staff in conjunction with that playbook. It's not like they can draw up a playbook and then boom, you got a staff that's not fit for that. You kind of have to tailor it. A good coach will do that. So, and Chip Kelly totally did that. He did not go. They were doing a no huddle this year, but they weren't flying at the clip that the Eagles were flying at. It was very much more West Coast style offense, methodical, very Andy Reid-esque is what it reminded me of. Only Andy Reid's way better at it, and also defensively they just couldn't stop anybody. So a lot of and that didn't help either. but I think Baalke, it needed to happen. His culture, his philosophy just did not work. Name one guy with an ACL tear that made something of himself from his draft choices. Oh, that's right. None of them made that. None of them made it. Some of them played, but didn't make any of it. I think there's some potential out of Will Redmond. He was one of the last ones that came out last year, but he didn't even touch the field. I think he touched the field. Yeah, he never touched the field. They used their one IR activation on him, and then he never saw the field, and they put him right back. Along with, 12 other guys. So I was glad to see him go. He just needed to go. There's some picks he's made that I like, but overall, when you back up and look at the macro of his player selection, it just wasn't enough to sustain the depth and the skill that is needed to win at the NFL level.
Exactly. I mean, we've talked about this before. He couldn't pick a wide receiver, for instance, to save his life.
No, A.J. Jenkins was a one-and-done year. Free agents he was good at, but I mean that's easy because you're picking players that have a proven record. It's easy to look at Anquan Boldin and say, great, let's get him. It's easy to look at a guy that's coming off season and say Pierre Garçon, yeah, sure, let's sign him. That would be a great move. Michael Floyd would have been dynamite, but Patriots swooped him up real quick. Just little things like that, and also the frugalness of Trent Baalke was also a little frustrating too. You have a lot of cap money, and I understand that they made an effort to get some guys, but clearly there was a degree of aggressiveness or appeal that just didn't quite sell players to come over here. And I don't think it was necessarily the culture, but I think it was just a little bit of frugalness on Baalke's part. I know that Prague Marate is the guy that he's more the numbers guy. He's the guy that balances the budget. He's not the guy that goes in there and says, hey, we want you to play for our team. No, he's the guy that kind of signs the checks, makes sure all of the finances are great. He has an MBA. That's what he's in charge of doing. That's perfect for him. But for Trent Baalke's case, I just don't think he sometimes it worked out. Most of the time it didn't. We looked at free agent guys. Every free agent guy we were looking at in the offseason this year, none of them came to the 49ers with the exception of Zane Beatles, who probably just didn't have anywhere else to go. Or perhaps, that was the guess I'm looking at because they looked at Sean Smith. They looked at Osemele, who went to the Raiders, and both of them ended up having good seasons. Sean Smith took him a little bit while to acclimate more than Osemele, but Osemele's had an outstanding season. I think he's a Pro Bowler this year. But a lot of missed opportunities, and his stubbornness to maintain that philosophy that's not working out is the definition of insanity. He just kept doing the same thing, expecting different results, and it just never happened.
Yeah, I mean, there's also some other things that came out to kind of play off of that. Was that apparently he communicated very, very little with coaches about the draft, and you just got whatever he gave you, and maybe that came from him going back and forth with Harbaugh. I don't know if that was something that had developed over the years, but yeah, apparently there was no communication over draft picks, and and then there's this whole I guess Chip wanted Dak Prescott and he didn't thing, and I don't know about any of that. I feel like every scouts, every team's someone from every team right now is saying that they wanted Dak Prescott and someone else didn't.
That one I don't put too much onus on because A, it's coming from Jay Glazer, who is kind of annoying, and B, it's go to any team any draft year, and every single team or every single coach will can name a player off the top of their head that they wanted that they didn't get, or name a player that they wanted but the GM ended up choosing somebody else instead.
Exactly.
It's like those are a dime a dozen.
Yep. Exactly. So I think also, though, part of this comes from the fact that honestly, I think part of this comes from the fact that you've got so maybe some of the reason you also get rid of. So this is what Jed York said, and I want to hear your take on this, and then we'll start looking towards the future. But Jed York in his press conference, we all saw the press conference. I thought he handled the press conference really well.
Heated like he took a lot of flack, and it feels like the flack against him in these press conferences has progressed over the course of the last 3 seasons. And not only are fans frustrated, but clearly beat writers who cover the 49ers are also equally as frustrated, and that certainly came out within the questions I was hearing him getting asked.
Well, yeah, definitely, because I think many of these beat writers, whether they care to admit it or not, I think they're fans. They're fans of the 49ers. That's why they're beat writers for the 49ers.
Yeah.
And so I think it comes out. I think sometimes. I think I might be a Jed York apologist until he wins a Super Bowl, and then everyone claims how much they always love Jed York. Until everyone's that becomes the news story. I think he's made some big mistakes, but I think really what I see in Jed is the fact that as a yearning to win, he wants to win really bad. So because of that, he's made some mistakes, but his drive to win, I think it'll get us there eventually. So,
yeah, it's not like he wants to lose. It's not like he's sitting up there like, oh, great, this is terrific. I mean, his parents were more like that. They didn't understand the sports aspect of owning a sports team. Jed understood that a little bit better, obviously better than his parents did. And at the same time, he's kind of learning the hardships of not only building a successful franchise, but more importantly, in his case, maintaining a successful franchise, and that you can't just jettison things like that or pick sides, because once you do that, if you pick the wrong side, you can see how quickly things just go to rock bottom.
Yeah, I mean, he is definitely learning. It's definitely school of hard knocks for him right now. He's on the job training, and the fact is he wants to get it right. He wants to make the right decision. He wants the team to be successful, and I think that because his heart's in the right place, his head is getting there too. Unfortunately, we just have to, as fans, be the recipients of a team that has gone from such tremendous success to very, very poor success.
Yeah.
So having said all that, I thought the couple things he said, there's no answer I give you guys is going to be satisfactory to you guys, and he said that from the beginning. And I was like, well, that's true. I agree with that 100%. No answer is going to be satisfactory. But he said that the reason he let go of Chip was because he thought that he never saw improvement coming out of the team. And
depends what your definition of improvement is. I mean, go ahead. Well,
I mean, I have to say that I agreed with that. I thought that over the course of 16 games, regardless of what, and I'm sure there's some numbers that can refute it, but I felt like regardless, outside of the Rams games, the 49ers pretty much could only give you about 30 minutes of football for most of those games this year. That's about what they're capable of doing. The defense suffered a lot of injuries, so I think they were in a position where they could never get better. But I didn't think they should have fired Chip, but I thought his reasoning was fair. What are your thoughts on it?
Logically, it makes sense. I mean, if you look at it more finitely, you can certainly look to, I'd say, a handful of games, if not more, where the 49ers actually played to the last game. Carolina comes to mind early in the season. Seattle, obviously, at the very end here. The Miami game was another one against a Miami team that's doing well, that's in the playoffs, and a lot of credit goes to Adam Gase, and we're going to interview his defensive coordinator, which we'll get into in the future here. But I didn't see any defensive improvement because they were riddled with injuries, and actually all of the teams with the most IR, at least majority of the teams in the NFL that had the most players on IR, also, to no surprise, had the worst records in the NFL, with the exception of the Baltimore Ravens, who, by the way, are not in the playoffs.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm saying, but do you feel like you didn't see improvement out throughout the whole year?
I
mean, do you feel
did,
like
but it was really minute. I mean, as a whole, at the micro level, there was some improvement. Kaepernick improved from the previous year. The offensive line improved from the previous year. The running game was top 5 in the NFL, and that's because it was a combination of quarterback running, decisive, very, very well-timed quarterback running. Like Kaepernick ran beautifully all year long, and he's a very smart runner. He's not reckless like Russell Wilson or even more so Cam Newton. Cap is an excellent runner, excellent scrambler, probably the best in the NFL in my opinion. And those are areas I saw improvement defensively. I didn't see anything. I saw a little bit of improvement in the passing game, but the front seven was just absolutely dismal. Once Bowman went down and Ray Armstrong went down, there was nothing that we could do in terms of stopping the run. It certainly wasn't going to come from the backups, and every time backups came in there, they went down. We were on third string and practice squad guys by the end of the year. And that's just not going to cut it. DeForest Buckner on a micro level, DeForest Buckner had a great rookie season. He had I believe 6 sacks, over 6 sacks. He hit all of his goals for the year. His personal goals that he set, he wanted 6 sacks this year. He hit the same goals that Aaron Lynch set a couple years ago in his rookie year. Now, speaking of, Aaron Lynch was a huge disappointment this year. I know he had the suspension, but then when he came back, he had the leg injury and was just never capitalized on himself. So I think, the suspension's huge. You got to stay on your P's and Q's, because if you don't, you can just be thrown out of rhythm. And Aaron Lynch is more of a rhythm, momentum guy, and he was never able to establish any of that. Going forward, again, on the macro level, the team took a step back in terms of last year. We obviously won more games last year, but the offense looked terrible last year. The offensive line in particular was one of the worst in the NFL. This year was kind of more mid-grade, maybe lower mid-grade, I'd say, as a group. They also sustained some injuries late in the year, and they lost some of their big guns, and Josh Garnett had to go through his growing pains early, but I'd throw him in the fire. He's your first-round pick. Buckner's out there having more defensive snaps than any other rookie, so you might as well get his licks too. Let's prepare him for next year, because these guys need to work out. Eric Armstead, Buckner, and Josh Garnett are guys that I really want to see work out. Rashard Robinson also had a good year for a rookie. If he was a 3-4 year player, I would say you probably need to dump him. But as a rookie, he played very well. He made a lot of mistakes, he got a lot of flags thrown his way, but that's part of his technique and discipline. He's aggressive, which I like. He's also big, which I like. So he just needs to work on his discipline. Is great, but yeah, I mean, going back to your question, I'm kind of getting more details in about it, as I always do. But from a macro stance, yes, the team took a step back. They looked worse than they did last year, and a lot of the predictions about what their record would be turned out to be very true, to my surprise.
Yeah, we were you and I both really, I expected, okay, in my defense, I expected a team somewhere between 5 and 8 wins, but I did not expect a team to only win 2 and just be so lackluster on as a team. You know what I mean? To struggle this, maybe not lackluster is the right word. Maybe just struggled this badly. I didn't expect that.
Yeah, I didn't expect that either. So on a macro level, they took a step back. On a micro level, I saw a lot of things that I liked, and some things that you can build for in the future.
There it is. So now, talking about that future, let's get into the future. Where do we go from here?
From here, we are building from scratch to a large degree. GM, the Niners are now trying to interview general managers and head coaching positions. A lot of them coming out in combinations. We're interviewing both of Green Bay's top GM and personnel director. So both those guys are, I believe, this Thursday. The Niners will be in Green Bay interviewing both those guys. It's Brian Gutekunst and Elliot Wolf, who is the son of the great Wolf. I forget his father's name, but great guy, a great long lineage and great tree. So our guy Scott McCloughan comes from his dad's tree. Scott McCloughan's a good coach. He's doing good things over in Washington, as one example.
You mean Scott McCloughan? You mean as a GM?
As a GM, yes. On the head coaching side, we're thinking about Josh McDaniels, who I hear is an asshole, or at least was an asshole in Denver. I think he's kind of been sitting pretty, having to build his reputation back up in New England. Kind of easy thing to do when you got a guy like Tom Brady behind center. So he's another one. I know they're also thinking about Nick Caserio, who is the GM over in New England. So that would be a combination. That's why these combos are coming up like this. Although in Green Bay's case, it's those two, Elliot Wolf and Brian Gutekunst, are competing against each other. I know they're also looking at defensive coordinator Vance Joseph for a head coaching position. I don't like this one at all. Miami's 10-6. They improved this year offensively, but defensively they were ranked 30th against the rush. Passing, they were kind of middle ground, 15th. Yards per game, they were 30th or 29th, almost dead last. Points allowed, they were lower mid-tier, 18th in the league. To me, that doesn't really necessarily scream, yay. So I'm not sure about him. The intriguing one out of the whole group that's coming out is Thomas Riddick, who's an ESPN analyst. He played for the Niners in the 90s. He played for several other teams, played for about 8 or 9 years in the NFL, then became a scout, then went to ESPN. This guy is interesting because he has a lot of football experience as a player. He also has football experience as a scout, so he knows how to evaluate talent. Whether he'd be good as a GM or not remains to be seen. He'd be kind of new blood into that role because he's never been a GM. But I think people are kind of intrigued by this guy because he's talked a lot about Josh McDaniels. He likes that guy, so there is an inclination of a possible marriage between those two if that was to come to fruition. He also is he's also a little bit skeptical of Colin Kaepernick. He thinks that Cap is more successful if you put weapons around him, like we've always said. At the same time, he doesn't think Cap's going to get any better than what we've seen in terms of efficiency. And I think that's pretty dead on. But you can see that when he is efficient, if you put a good roster around him, you still got a pretty darn good quarterback. You don't have an elite quarterback, but you have an above-average quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, I mean, definitely a lot of options out there. I think that I think you really could lure in a good coach if you get a good GM first, and someone from Cowboy lineage, someone from New England lineage. I mean, those are definitely
exactly,
organizations with wonderful reputations and histories of current histories of success. And so you grab one of those guys, and then I think you can build from there. The nice part is we're the only team looking for a GM, so we have no competition on that front. And there's only 32 GM jobs in the world, so they're highly coveted. And so the opportunity to go and you have a situation like San Francisco where you can come in and basically completely take over, that's got to be fairly enticing for someone who is looking to make the jump into the general management position from one of these key executive front office positions.
Exactly, and not just any team. We're talking about the San Francisco 49ers, and sure, we have our bias as San Francisco natives and birthright fans, but at the same time, this is a team that despite having, we talked a little bit about this off air, despite having a 2-14 record, they still managed to take the spotlight away from the rest of the NFL that was all trying to, that a lot of teams were playing spoiler or trying to solidify their position within the playoff tournament. And the Niners just eclipsed all of that by firing their GM, firing their head coach, and now being rock bottom, trying to fill those two positions and start to build this roster back up to prominence. Despite all of that, that's all bad news. But that news still superseded the rest of the league. Why? Because the San Francisco 49ers are a premier franchise, and no matter what kind of news is coming out of a premier franchise, it still takes precedence over the rest of the league because that's what a premier franchise does.
It's true. I mean, I've talked about this before on the GoldCast before, but there's a reason why whenever you see NFL commercials, you almost always see the 49ers as one of the logos that's being presented on there. You're always going to see the Cowboys, the Giants, the Niners, the Pats a lot. It's just one of those premier franchises. Cowboys, you're always going to see the 49ers right up in there. I mean, they're in the top like 7 of the premier ones. So, news coming out of San Francisco is always big, regardless of what it is. It's always really big. So, I am excited. I really, really hope we land one of these executives from one of these premier leagues. And looking at you, Green Bay and New England, I hope we land one of those guys because I think you land that GM and the rest of it falls into place at that point.
I agree, especially I think, and GM too. Here's the thing with GM guys, if you're a guy like Theo Epstein, who is very confident, has built successful teams before, something like this is very appealing to you because you get to come in and build from scratch.
Now, Ray, let's take a quick look into the playoffs. Niners are obviously out. A big shock. Niners are out. They're out this year. And we've got the wild card round, and it's some pretty rough games for the first round. I feel like the only game that I'm really excited for is Giants-Packers. I think that game is going to be awesome. I'm actually really sad that they're playing each other in the wild card round. I would have much preferred this to have been a divisional game. You've got Dolphins, Steelers, Raiders, Texans, Lions, Seahawks, Giants, Packers. What a rough one. So, Ray, let's break this down real quick. The Raiders. Let's just talk. I want to talk about the Raiders. God, Old Man Davis. It's like every time something bad happens, Old Man Davis disappears. Every time something happens to the Rams, Louis B disappears. I just find it really convenient that our co-hosts somehow manage to avoid any week where we have an opportunity to completely bash their poor teams. Do you notice this?
Yeah, it's really convenient. It's very it must be nice to be able to cower in the shadows anytime that you got to deal with adversity with your team. Here we are talking about 2-14 Niners.
Yeah, and then and they never seem to skip a beat on those weeks where we're just getting destroyed yet again.
Yeah, I still think that it's and I guess in Old Man Davis's case, I think the Raiders will probably top the Texans because the Texans are a far worse team than the Raiders, despite the Raiders having gotten their head chopped off a couple times.
Okay, see, now I thought that too, and Louis B actually, he texted me this morning that he believes the Raiders are going to win because the Texans are starting Brock Osweiler. But the thing about it is that, last week Raiders really, really struggled with moving the ball. They weren't really capable of doing it very well, and this is against a very strong Denver defense. Now, the Texans' defense is also really, really strong. So I don't know. I think this thing.
They're
could be
strong,
ugly.
but they break a lot. They bend and they break. That's the kind of defense they are. They're inconsistent.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to admit, I could see the Texans winning this one. I really could.
I could, but it really depends on what defense shows up. And here's the thing. The Raiders are in a position now where they are vulnerable enough to be susceptible to that defense. So that could very well backfire. If Carr was in there, then I'd say no dice. You're not gonna outshoot the Raiders. The Texans don't have the firepower to do that, and the defense isn't strong enough to hold them all game.
Oh, agreed. 1,000% agreed. I agree with that most definitely. Now, let's move on to Lions-Seahawks. I think the Seahawks win that one.
I think so too. Unfortunately, this is just a really bad matchup for the Lions. I think the Lions will put up a good defensive fight for most of the time. But I mean, if the Lions can do what the Niners did better, then they've got a shot. But it really depends on how well they're able to do that. I mean, the Lions have a knack for just not going very deep, no matter what playoff year it is for them. But I'm gonna take the Seahawks. It's an easy one. They're at home. They just won against us. I think that was a good wake up call. Like, hey, don't take anyone for granted, no matter how bad they are. You almost just lost to a 2-14 team. So I think they'll be ready to play against the Lions. I don't think the Lions will be able to sustain 4 quarters against them.
Yeah. Now, Dolphins Steelers, man, that's a wonky game too. I literally never know which Steeler game is going to show up. But I mean, the Steelers have been playing fairly well in the second half of the season.
Dolphins lost their quarterback, and we just went over their defense. Steelers all day.
Yeah, exactly. Then the final one, the big matchup of the weekend. This really deserved to be in the divisional round. Unfortunately, that's just not the way the numbers played out. New York Giants at Green Bay Packers. What do you think? I'll tell you what I think. I already know exactly who I think is going to win this game.
Well, Aaron Rodgers is playing really good right now. Parts of their defense are playing really good right now. They're in Lambeau Field, which is always an advantage. The Giants, though, do have a really good knack for disrupting opponents within the playoffs. They have a history of that. I'm going to say, but a good defense will shut down an elite quarterback any day, and I think that the Giants' defense is good enough to take care of Aaron Rodgers, despite the fact that Aaron Rodgers played really good down the stretch in the latter half of the season and was able to lift the Packers into the playoffs, but I just don't think they've got enough to overcome the Giants' defense.
I am in agreement with you. I do not believe the Packers have enough to overcome the New York Giants defense. Defense wins championships. We're in the playoffs, and this is really, really where defenses start to come into play. Offense will get you to the post. Defense will win that championship. And I'm with you. I say Giants over Packers for sure. We agree Seahawks over Lions. We're split. I think the Texans defense is going to shut down that third string terrible quarterback the Raiders have, and I think that's the end for the Raiders. And we both agree Steelers over Dolphins. Yeah, that's good stuff. Now, Raymond, where can they find us?
You can find us at our new Twitter handle, at GoldCastSF. That is part of the expansion project, because we're going to be focusing on more than just the 49ers. We're going to be focusing on the Bay Area teams, and some jackass took GoldCast, so we have to do GoldCast SF. You can also like us on Facebook, facebook.com/49ersGoldCast. There might be some changes coming to that. I'm not sure if Facebook allows us to do that, but for now, the same site you've always come to love and like on Facebook. And then you can also subscribe to us via iTunes, YouTube, and Twitcher. Those are terrific because the second we go live, you're going to get a notification. Make sure to click the right notification tabs on YouTube. I think you have to subscribe and then also click the little bell symbol that's also there. That was something new that happened this year. So if that way, when we go live, you'll get notified. You'll be able to listen to it right there on the spot via iTunes, YouTube, and Stitcher. Do it.
Do it. Make it happen. Raymond, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Ray Solis. You can also find me on Facebook.
Bam.
Because I take care of the GoldCast Facebook page. So when you respond, you'll usually be responding to me, or Rudy will chime in as well.
That's right. And you can find me at Rudy Solis 3rd, Rudy Solis 3RD. And that's it. We will be back.
Breaking news. This came in just within the last 30 minutes. 49ers to interview 30-year-old Redskins offensive coordinator Sean McVay for the head coaching vacancy on Monday. And for those of you kids who don't know your 49ers history, Sean McVay is the son of John McVay, who, by the way, was the GM for the 49ers, who picked all of our tremendous players throughout the 80s era.
Ooh, I like that.
So interesting name thrown into the mix there. We'll see how that shapes up. And Washington is actually a decent team. They did not make the playoffs, but it's an interesting name just because of the history and the ties. And Washington's actually a decent team. They're not a great team, but they're a decent team. And
Yeah, he'd actually be the youngest head coach, I think, and definitely in the NFL. I don't know about maybe even ever. He's only like 30.
oh wow, he's super young. He's younger than Adam Gase, who's I believe 38.
Yeah, that's really young. So, anyways, well, we'll see. That's another name tossed into the ring. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about when next week comes up. You and I about all where all this is going. And as you guys know, the GoldCast is not stopping. Make sure that you check out tomorrow. We will have our recap. Dan the Man will be on to recap UFC 207. What a crazy main event bout, all three fights, and it was good stuff. So we'll be back for that, and hope you guys like the new intro. The new intro is pretty hot. And no response from Ray, huh?
I didn't know you were throwing that my way. I've heard it. I've heard a couple different versions of it. I like the one. I like the one that says the full name. So I hope you guys like it too. We like it. It's part of the expansion thing. More of that stuff coming soon, including new logos and all that kind of stuff. All that kind of details.
All that jazz. So concludes another edition of the GoldCast. I almost said the 49ers. So Steve and I got to use it. So concludes another edition of the GoldCast. I'm your host, Rudy Solis III, and with me is my brother, my co-host,
Raymond Solis the first, baby.
Boom! We'll see you next time. Same GoldCast time, same GoldCast channel.
This is the GoldCast.